Today we're going to be talking about protecting vulnerable kids. We might even touch upon foster youth, mental health, breaking cycles of trauma, human trafficking. And today we're very honored to share our guest with you, Jennifer Hammer from Rising Ground, right here in New York. Yay, New York is what I'm going to say. Leading organization serving vulnerable kids, families, and communities facing crises. Jennifer is the Anti-Human Trafficking Response Coordinator with Rising Ground. It's a nonprofit organization, again, dedicated to supporting children, adults, families, so needed, through all these different services, which we're going to get into. They serve Rising Ground thousands of individuals every year. And the mission is focused on healing, trauma, promoting stability, and empowering, one of our favorite words at the Warriors, empowering long-term success. So Rising Ground has been, well, we'll let Jennifer talk about it, around for a long time, I think more than a century, and they've been on the front lines, at the forefront. So today we're going to focus our discussion on protecting vulnerable youth. Again, families, we're not having enough talk about the whole family unit and really giving them the tools they need in this overwhelming world to succeed, and addressing this trauma early on and understanding how social media, instability, and all of that influence is really shaping a lot of our kids' lives and creating emotional instability and pain. And it's not just about policy, Jennifer, it's also about boots on the ground. And that's why Rising Ground is the boots on the ground. So we want to educate everybody, because we don't want to lose this generation, to neglect, exploitation, addiction, violence, and despair, which we're already seeing and escalating. But the pendulum is beginning to swing back. And we're going to start talking about that. So Jennifer Hammer, welcome to the Warriors.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so thrilled that you're here, because I hear such great things about you. And I want to start, though, before we get into your job in Rising Ground. Tell us anything you want about you, whether it's your background, anything you want. I leave it open for you to share.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So where do I begin? I've been doing anti-human trafficking on and off for almost 20 years. Started doing the work in 2006. Done everything from prevention, intervention. I've done case management. I'm super passionate about spreading awareness about human trafficking, providing trainings to both young people throughout the 5 boroughs in New York City in my current role, and then also to the staff and to the helping professionals that work with those young people.
So let me ask you, and you can answer this or not, what got you started in all of this? I'm sure that's a question you might get a lot, right? Like, how did you get started? Why did you get started? Why are you passionate?
Yeah, so during the time that I was getting my undergrad, I was actually enrolled in CUNY at the Harlem campus. And during the time that I was attending school, getting my undergrad, I found out about a program called GEMS in New York City, which is Girls Educational and Mentoring Services. I got connected with them, and I started working with them as an admin, and then eventually an outreach coordinator. And so a lot of the work that I did for them really shaped my passion to move forward into this field. Back then in 2006, there was much less awareness, much less advocacy. And so coming into the field, it was definitely an uphill battle at that time, but that uphill battle really inspired me to be a change maker and to come into this field and to do my best to spread the awareness about the topic, in particular to young people who are most vulnerable to this type of recruitment. And also being that things with the internet were really starting to pick up speed back then. And initially, when I came into this work, a lot of young people had maybe met traffickers in person or had been recruited in person. But then over the course of this 15 to 20 years that I've been involved in anti-trafficking work, I've seen a big shift where a lot of it has moved towards online exploitation and online recruitment, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, first of all, I am going to thank you, Jennifer, for being passionate, for doing this work. It's not easy. And thank you for your commitment and dedication. It really is the definition of a warrior. That's the first thing. And I want to mention the website is also risingground.org, but Don't worry, warriors out there. I will have everything in the body of the video so you can take your time. You can go to the website. You can see how you can help, donate, whatever it is, and get involved in the community. Okay, so let's talk about your position at Rising Ground. Explain what you do there, the
Sure. So,
landscape, the landscape, and also, I mean, there's so many things to cover, right? It's like complex,
yes,
but we'll start with, that's what I hesitated. I'm like, no, first we have to understand what Jennifer does at Rising Ground. So we'll start there.
perfect. Yeah. So I have kind of like two separate boxes of what I would say of what I do. So there's this whole prevention box. So the prevention box is I go into middle schools and high schools throughout New York City, and I speak to young people, provide a workshop that takes up a class period, talk to them about different definitions of human trafficking, talk to them about the myths and facts, recruitment, what it looks like both online and in person. And we also talk about grooming, and then following up the presentations with resources. And then also part of my role is to train the school staff so that the school staff can also recognize recruitment or anything that looks like recruitment with the staff and the young people that they serve. And then additionally, I train Rising Ground staff to recognize recruitment and red flags. Now, Rising Ground has a few thousand employees, over 130 different programs. So it's a
Wow.
gigantic organization, serves many, many families throughout the year. So even just the training piece for my colleagues is huge. I think I trained over the first year and a half of being with this organization, almost 400 of my colleagues. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
It's a lot.
So
It's a lot.
and then even on top of that, I go out into community organizations. So I train other nonprofits. I train community programs that have after school programs. I do also PTA meetings. So wherever there's a need, if someone was to say, hey, we really think that our young people or our staff or our colleagues will benefit from this training, I come in to provide that training. So the second box of what I do is that, let's say, for example, I go to a school, I'm providing prevention workshops, and a young person makes a disclosure that they themselves have been trafficked, then I can provide to that person case management services, resource coordination, and I can also provide them with the like referrals to any other organizations that say they need certain things that we can't provide in-house, perhaps at Rising Ground. Then I'll help them make those connections, and then also providing support groups.
That's a lot. That's a lot. But you know
Yeah.
what you do? The one of the most important things. So obviously the prevention, right? I feel like we have to talk about this every day, like raising awareness, even though that's thrown around a lot, raising awareness, we still have to say it, raising awareness, prevention, right? But also you have services which are sorely lacking, not only in New York, but around the country. So Rising Ground is really doing a terrific job providing services. Uh, Takeaways. Now, let me ask you about, so with all of this, and it's a lot what you do, what about the parents? Because I do schools myself, but then about 2 years ago, I decided, Jennifer, like, wait a minute, I got to also get in there with parents so they can recognize the risks and check on their kids and kind of train them. Do you work with parents in helping them understand the risks, or you strictly go with the kids? Like, what is the landscape there?
Yeah, so with parents, I have been invited to parent teacher association meetings. I've done some in person, I've done some virtual. I've provided full scope um, human trafficking one-on-one trainings for parents, which um, also similarly help them to identify myths and facts and understand what trafficking is, and then also have a Q&A section. And usually that Q&A section with the parents is very robust. They're asking a lot of questions about
Good.
internet usage and what they can do for young people, what to do if someone has been recruited. And so some of those PTA meetings have been very helpful for parents. I would say that I also tried my best to provide education around different apps and things like that that are out there that that young people might be on, or that maybe have been identified by law enforcement partners of mine that are at higher risk for young people to get recruited on. So that's more or less what the conversations look like for the parents.
Yeah, that's good because it's funny because when I started, I would always do in the classrooms, I would do kind of a webinar the night before and invite parents that way to come on. But I have to tell you, not a lot of parents showed up for the webinar. So they would sign off on their child could, attend the class because we do permission slips, right? And and that was always frustrating to me, but what I've seen in the last year is that has really ticked up, like, there's an uptick in parents are so I think this is good news, Jennifer, like, there's hope.
Yeah.
They are hearing more about this, there's more in the media about things. They are wanting to understand, especially we're sitting on AI, a lot going on. What do you see right now? Again, a complex question. What are some of the biggest struggles you think today in 2026 kids are struggling with and facing?
Well, I think that young people are facing pressure from their peers potentially about exposing themselves, showing, every instance of their private life, with social media. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, you don't come home and then unplug. You come home and continue. And so I think that young people will also face like, this like acceptance about, oh, well, it's okay to be on things like OnlyFans. It's okay to accept money for exchange of different things related to your body. I mean, we even have normalization of like, oh yeah, like if I can't pay the bills, I'm gonna take these feet photos and post them
Yes.
online. And so a lot of that plays into what buyers are very interested in, which is normalization of purchasing people for profit. And so young people are facing that in addition to, whoever their favorite celebrities are, um, and what their favorite celebrities are up to and doing. And a lot of what we have is let's expose more of ourselves, let's show more of ourselves. And so I think the whole trending piece of that will eventually make young people question, oh, well, maybe certain things are not that bad. Maybe getting involved or spending time in these type of venues to make money is not a big deal. And that's exactly what exploiters and both the buyers are interested in.
Yeah. So you're talking about it's become normalized and people become habituated that I like to say, like almost the 30 and under crowd, they've grown up in this digital bubble. And I'm even going to go as far, Jennifer, it's not their fault. It was like thrown at everybody, right? Like
Mm,
social media. And we thought it was great at the time, Facebook. Well, I remember MySpace, but then we went to Facebook and it was like connect with family and friends. It sounds good, right? And then it has
yeah,
exploded. But we see this. Listen, we have a sexualized society anyway, right? Let's talk about
yeah.
entertainment from the music to what's streaming today, what's acceptable. So I don't blame any kids or anything like that. But my question to you, like how I'm always thinking about how do we really break this? Because, we work with girls and young women and they're not going to stand in Walgreens or CVS when and they're smart too. And that's the part that like hurts so much, right? That from different backgrounds too. I'm going to show pictures of my feet for $400 and like they think it's okay. How do we get because there's so much trauma involved in all of this as well. Like thoughts on this because I'm always trying to break that cycle and it seems like the money part no matter what we work on is always winning out with all this.
Yeah, unfortunately we are in that push and pull, like of, okay, society is kind of saying that this is okay, social media is kind of saying that's okay, but also maybe there's parents or other folks that are in a young person's life that are talking to them about the moral aspects of this, or talking to them about the dangers, the harm. Like a lot of people will paint the sex industry as glamorous, and what we need is a lot more folks that have lived experience, also different curriculums that help to educate on the realities, because what a lot of those folks say is that, yeah, maybe you sold some pictures for a certain amount of money, but maybe now you're going to have barriers in other areas of your life that you can't foresee at a younger age when you might be involved in this. So later on in the future, if you wanted to get into certain industries, that could be a barrier. Or perhaps like later on, you might encounter a person who is potentially a buyer who has malicious intent, and now you're already involved with this person, and how do you get out of that situation? And so um, I think that's one of the things that they try to pull wool over young people's eyes about, like, oh well, yeah, this is totally safe and nothing bad will come out of it, when there are so many different scenarios in which things can go sideways.
Yeah, and they also sell a bill of goods, my body, my choice, and,
Hmm.
and female empowerment. We should also mention there are a lot of boys that are being, sucked into this trafficking. We don't even hear as much about them because we can't even hear that much about all the girls. It's a tough subject that people back
Yep.
off of. What I want you to explain. So many people say to me, oh, well, that would never happen to my child. Or somebody will say to me, well, that wouldn't happen to me. I'd just kick somebody and run away. They don't understand the psychological bonds or trauma coming from a vulnerable background. I know I'm throwing a lot at you. So however you want to answer. But they also, Jennifer, they don't understand, mostly there's a lot of familial trafficking, like exploitation
Hmm.
within families that nobody pretty much wants to talk about. They still think of it, I'll use that old white van analogy. They don't understand this is really even escalating a lot within. We saw a lot of that during COVID, right? When
Hmm.
people were pressed, mothers were pressed to pay rent, and we had landlords going after them for themselves or their kids. Fill us in about any of that, and the eventual price is really, in my opinion, lifelong trauma, but you're the expert, so let's talk
Hmm.
about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I definitely agree. There was a huge uptick in virtual and online exploitation, extortion, and things like that from COVID to present, I would say. And I would say that before that, it was still happening, but it wasn't happening at the levels that it started to happen after. And I think that one of the important pieces is just that as young people are growing up and developing, to have positive relationships with an adult in their life that they can feel safe to go to. Because imagine how challenging it must be if a young person has a parent that's trafficking them, and that's a person who is providing everything for you and is creating the container of what is your life. And it's hard to try to step out of a situation like that when you don't have support. And so making sure that young people have those supports, that they know that there are adults out there who don't want to do them harm and want to help them and want to support them in different ways. I think that's one of the big pieces. But I would say as well that with familial trafficking and with even trafficking from like domestic partners and things like that, happen so much more than that white van, that stranger danger picture that is painted. And I think that's one of the biggest things in my work that I'm doing, is trying to dispel those myths that, oh, it's, someone's going to kidnap you and in a, a taken type movie situation, versus the fact that unfortunately most of the time traffickers and exploiters are people that you probably know in some level of capacity, and they use that relationship, that bond, whatever it is, in order to control someone and to manipulate and coerce someone. um, the only situation where I say like stranger danger is still very high would probably be online, because there's so many people out there around the world that can speak to folks and try to coerce young people into maybe providing videos and pictures and things like that. But this is still very much an issue that affects families, partners, and people that are close to those young people that are being preyed on, including like LGBTQ plus
Yes.
youth. Like um, because they're very fetishized, and because there's a market of folks that are out there and interested in them specifically, there can be a lot of instances where they become vulnerable, because maybe they're having displacement from homes, or maybe they're in situations where they don't have support. A trafficker can come along and say, well, I'll support you. I will support your lifestyle and what you're choosing to do. And that's very appealing to someone who maybe doesn't have that kind of support.
Yeah, and kids will do, young people, if you're hungry and have to, you need a roof over your head, or you want to, somebody offers you a hamburger after 24 hours, if you're out on the streets or something, you're going to go with them, thinking, being trusting, right? Kids always think they're so much smarter than they are. But yes, and we need to do more work with that group of vulnerable youth or LGBTQ, as far as education, as far as, and I'm saying giving them more, right? Because there's not like a lot, even for jobs, right? Like
Yes, it's very
there
hard.
it is so hard to get them play. It's hard to get anybody placed, but it's really hard. So we have to work more on that as well. I'm glad you brought that up. But I wanted to ask you about, I wanted to mention also, as you were saying all of this, so many girls, and I'm going to say starting at age 11, because we work with Nurses United Against Human Trafficking across the nation, and are showing up in emergency rooms with these strangulation
Mhm.
marks as young as 11. The youngest one I heard about was 10 from one of my sources.
Mhm.
So again, girls are accepting this kind of behavior. Again, I'm not even blaming the boys because they're seeing so much pornography online, which is basically fetishes. It's basically strangulation. It's not like just people having sex. It's like really like ramped up, what horrible what they're doing these days. So girls are accepting this and boys think that's what you do, to get a girl's attention. It's very mixed up. How do we I want to get at that a little bit. I People are in denial about all of that, right? Let's talk about the impact of social media. Let's break it down a little bit. And we touched upon it, but what are you seeing there? Because this really seeps into every conversation about, I think, all of this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in many cases, we're still dealing with the topic of healthy masculinity and how to talk to boys about being allies to women and girls, to talk to them about um, what what is also a normal family structure. What are some positive relationships that you want to have with women
Mhm.
in your life? Not just your mother or your sister or your aunt, but also like folks who are like, your friends in school, intimate partners, healthy relationships. That's why I really like the prevention conversations, because even certain programs that just kind of go out there and talk about the dynamics of what makes healthy relationships can really help young people to kind of put it into perspective, because we have a lot of young people growing up in displaced families, broken families, separated families, and so they might not have good examples, tangible examples that they can see, which show healthy family dynamics, um, and how to carry on healthy relationships. There's many more examples, including online and social media, about toxic relationships. And you hear a lot of young people bringing up these hot button topics like gaslighting and talking about like all these different manipulations, but I don't hear them talking as much at all about what is healthy about the relationships that they're currently in, or healthy about relationships that they've been exposed to. And so we're going to have to do a better job of trying to also uh, educate young people on what relationships should look like, and how to have the best type of relationship for you, where it's like, it feels equal. Someone, there's not like a power struggle of some type necessarily, and that everyone feels safe.
Safe, yeah. What do you think about, the last study I had, and it's actually 2 years old now, you might have a better one. It was 9 to 17-year-olds spend 7 to 9 hours a day online, right? And okay, so they're learning a lot online, or they're watching TikTok, right? And they're watching YouTube and they're watching Snap and all that stuff. Um, so that being said, there's something called parental autonomy, right? We can't tell people when to buy their child a device or a phone. We can recommend and resources and safety guards, guardrails and all that. Do you think intervention should start age appropriate, like in preschool? With, I actually think these days we've got to build this into like programs for all children starting as early as we can. Again, age appropriate. But what's your take on something like that, since you do work with so many families and kids, and you are boots on the ground?
That's a great conversation. I think that we haven't like developed anything yet that is actually what I would say, like, this is the model that we should all use. But like, I know that technology has been integrated into classrooms. You know, there's smart boards, there's young people with iPads, and also with, laptops and all that. So technology is everywhere. But I think also at the same time, parents and young people can do things where they enter into like a digital contract where they talk about, this is how much internet we're going to engage in when we're home, and also make room for like the old school activities, like maybe like things like board games, or maybe like, going out for like a walk, or certain
Yeah.
activities that take you away from that. And every individual family can choose what those things are. In schools, I've noticed a lot, they have been able to reduce the amount of cell phone usage by
Mhm.
collecting the phones at the beginning of the day and the other devices and then returning them at the end. I think that's a great idea. I think that works really well. Um, but I think that what they're doing between when they get home at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, up until whatever time young people go to bed, there might not be as much structure. And parents are on their devices too. So I think it makes it even more challenging if you have a parent on their cell phone like this, and then you have the
Yes.
young person in another room in the cell phone. Um, it's also kind of creating I would say like a weird like separation between the family, where it's like, yeah, we're all in the same
Isolation.
house together,
Yeah.
but we're all on different devices, watching different things and doing different things. Um, and so I think that a lot of that has to come from home, which is hard because again, everybody's, kind of falling into this trap of technology um, throughout all generations. I even see like my 70 something year old parents that, they'll be doom scrolling as well. So, I think it's just something that we all need to kind of individually discuss as families and try to figure out what works best for everyone in in the home.
I mean, I suggest family digital partnerships. I kid you not. Like to
Mhm.
come up, and even if it's everybody puts the phones down for 30 minutes a day, like start somewhere, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not going away, right? And we can't really tell people what to do. We can suggest, but I'm like digital detox, 30 minutes a day. But getting back to deciding what you said, Jennifer, about like in the house, I say, what's wrong with having kids help do the laundry? I think we got to give them like some house chores, like to keep them busy and productive, and help the family out and things like that. A lot of kids are not doing things around the house like that, even that you may have done. I certainly did, right? And our
Yep.
parents may not have even asked us to do it. We just did it, kind of thing. But certainly family dinners we recommend, and getting out with nature, and just because, as you pointed out, work together. And there are plenty of studies that prove this, but we're more isolated than ever. So we can be under the same roof,
Mhm.
but everybody,
Yes.
and again, the parents, if we tell kids to put down devices and mom and dad are sitting there on their devices, like, really, that's not a good role model for all of this. So everybody's got to listen up about all of this. Um, do you think, because you've done this now for many years, do you think mental health, we have a youth mental health crisis in the United States? You think it's worsening? Do you think we're getting a handle on it? Where do you see this going in the next few years?
Um, I do think that it's not getting better. I would say
Mm.
like it's pretty consistent and remains consistent over time, with a lot of folks needing services and there being like a lack of services that are available for folks. Um, but I do think that it can be getting worse. And I think it has to do with the technology. I think it has to do with the separation.
Yes.
People are not feeling as connected, like, as they maybe used to. Like you could have a conversation with folks and they would even give you that direct eye contact. And now you have folks that they'll be having a whole conversation with you while they're also simultaneously writing an email and also texting, and so you're not getting 100% of any person's time. And it's hard to feel fulfilled when you're being pulled and separated in so many different directions all at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to slow down and take a breath. That's what everybody has to do, is take a break and a breath for a minute. Parents watching. We also have a lot of grandparents that watch us. We also have a lot of grandparents raising the children, right? Their
Yep.
parents aren't around, or they're incarcerated, or single moms, that work two jobs. So that's even harder to keep an eye on all of this. But parents or grandparents or caregivers watching, what would be one or two pointers you want to give them right now that they should look at? Because again, there is so much, but I'm so afraid there is so much that they'll close their eyes and walk away and do nothing. What are one or two things you would suggest to them right now to do?
I would suggest an open conversation about what they're doing online. Like, hey, is there anything that, maybe has happened? Have you ever played in Roblox and anything weird conversations? Or have you ever had like someone approach you that made you feel awkward? And how did you handle it? And, if it ever does happen and you were to come and tell me, this is how I would respond. And I think that's really important. I think we don't talk
Mhm.
enough about that. Like, young people are afraid often to come forward to adults in their life because they're not sure what will happen. But if we kind of close that gap and say, hey, if you come to me, this is what you can expect, and you build that trust, then I think that's a really important way for young people to feel safe to come forward to the adults in their life. And then sometimes, maybe it won't be that grandparent or that parent that's the go to. Who is the alternate? Maybe ask the young person right away, like, if you didn't feel safe to come to me and talk to me, would you go to aunt so and so or uncle so and so? Or is there who would you go to? Would it be your best friend? I think that's important to know, like, who young people feel safe to go to, because if that person that they are planning to go to might not have the best advice or might not have the capability, that could be a time to say, well, hey, listen, if you didn't want to come to me, I think if you went to so and so, I would feel safe about that. Would you feel safe about that? And maybe come to an agreement on who that other person could be. Um, and I think that will help to create more of a safety net around that young person.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because we work with a lot of families with sextortion, which primarily teenage boys. And every parent, and they don't even know each other, Jennifer, they'll say to me, I wish they had just come to me. So my question to myself always is like, well, why didn't they? Right? Like kids are embarrassed or there's not that open lines of communication.
Mm,
And it's heartbreaking because I hear the same thing over and over again. So we live in a different environment, a different, world. We have to there are kids are seeing because I have parents say like, "Oh no, I don't want to open the can of worms," and then I'm like, they're seeing it online anyway. You better open the can of worms so they get the information directly from you. So
yeah.
despite all of this, well, we have to teach kids. Would you agree? I think you would, but you'll tell me. There's a healthy world outside of the screens. I mean, there's so much that we've got to get that pendulum, and it is slightly swinging back. So let's finish up with despite all this, what we're talking about. And again, it's excellent because everybody has to keep talking about all of this, right? Opening up
Mhm.
conversation, knowing there are resources, at Rising Ground if you're in the New York area. What gives you hope in 2026 with the work you do, what you've seen transpire over the last few decades? How are you hopeful?
I feel hopeful because even though we may not necessarily have much more resources than we did years ago, we do have young people that are using social media and getting information in a way that's also productive at the same time. Like, a lot of young people have had conversations with me about what's happening in the world with Epstein or what's happening in the world with big cases, and the information that they're getting sometimes has really helped them to kind of understand the issues and vulnerabilities, and also just needing slightly more guidance and towards the conversation, but really are well informed. And I think that if we can continue to point young people in spaces where they can have these conversations
Mhm.
and feel empowered from them, I think that that's what gives me hope, to know that there's so many young people out there that want to know this information, want to share it with their peers, and want to be on the advocacy side of it. And so I think that's one thing. And also, there's so many more programs and organizations that are doing work now than when I first started doing this back in 2006. Like, I see so many more awareness, and even though we still got a long way to go, right? But I still see
Yeah.
so much change has happened over the past, 20 years, and so I think we're headed in the right direction in a lot of ways. And I think that we need to just continue to build up that advocacy, and keep in mind and perspective that we're doing this for the next generation so that they can also be empowered, and to recognize recruitment um, when it's coming towards them. And in particular, how the field and the scope of the online world will continue to change.
Yeah, I mean, we're protecting our kids, our future adults, our future leaders, right? We're
Hmm.
doing all that. Um, what would you say to what would you say to how can the let me rephrase this a little bit. How can the public help you at Rising Ground? What do you have for them to do? We always like to give homework to our warriors, get them involved somehow. Tell us about that a little bit. What can they do to directly help you?
Well, one thing they can do is to ask their schools that their young people are in, request these workshops, request these prevention programming to come to the school and to educate the young people about it. And also, I think just keeping themselves up to speed. There's so many different free trainings out there. Folks can even contact, depending on different, agencies and stuff like that. They can contact Rising Ground and get in touch with me. I can go out in the community and do trainings for folks, PTA meetings, things like that. So if people really want to get involved, um, there's so many different avenues to do it. And I would just say, like, educate yourself, like learn about what trafficking is, because that's the reason why our young people are being preyed upon, because the adults in their lives and the young people don't recognize it until, unfortunately, it gets into their young people's
Right.
devices, until it's hitting home directly. And we want to stop that as much as we can.
Yeah. And we want to listen to our young people because they complain to me nobody's listening to them. So we have to really step back and always take time for that. Well, Jennifer Hammer, risingground.org is the website. Again, everything will be listed in the body of this video, all of the contact information, the website. I can't thank you enough. Promise me you'll come back and talk to us at the Warriors. This is something we have to keep up on. We have to always talk
Yes.
about programs. We have to get you out there into schools or into I don't know. Do you go into places of worship and do any
Yeah.
of that?
Hmm.
Anywhere there's a group, like
Yeah.
we have to get you where there are two or more people because then it snowballs and hopefully they take the information and share it, with their circle. And that's how good work gets done and prevention and awareness at the same time. So listen, Jennifer Hammer, protecting children. Thank you for the work you do, dealing with this very complex. This is a very tough thing, and you're really doing warrior work. We commend you and Rising Ground, and we'll definitely speak with you again. But please know how much that we are honored that you spent time with us today and that you are doing the work you do, the real services that people need. So thank you, Jennifer Hammer.
No problem. Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you all the viewers for watching and for being a part of this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jennifer. We will speak again soon.